Oko-san has no time for intros. A couple of quick things before we start. First of all, most of what I know from this game comes from Dodger's playthrough on Press Heart to Continue. I put an annotation there so you can check it out, and I suggest you do. Second of all, the game is mainly story-based, so there will be spoilers early and often. First for the main game, and then for the secret final ending. I'll let you know when they come up. Now, with all that said, how do I even discuss Hatoful Boyfriend? Well, Hatoful Boyfriend is a visual novel / dating simulation game, meaning that most of the gameplay comes from reading the story and making small decisions here and there. It was originally released as an April Fool's joke before being turned into a full-fledged release and then being remade this year. The game stars a renameable protagonist, by default Hiyoko Tosaka, who is attending a prestigious private school. There she can interact with and eventually romance one of 9 different, well, birds. See, everyone in the school except for you is some form of bird. Wait, no, come on, hold on one second. As mentioned, the concept was an April Fool's joke, but the creator wanted to, and I quote, create something that seemed ridiculous and crazy at first glance, but once you looked into the world, you would fall into the depth. So, how much depth does this game have exactly? Well, let's take a closer look. Each of the birds, Ryota, Sakuya, Yuya, Oko-san, Nageki, Kazuaki, Shu, Azami, and Spoiler, are meant to parody some dating sim cliché, whether it's the sweet best friend, or the snobby aristocrat, or the suave ladies' man. Throughout the game, you'll come to know each of their personalities fairly well, yet surprisingly, each feels more fleshed out and layered than expected. Whether it's the hint of a darker past, or a character completely switching demeanor entirely, it feels more subtle and relatable than you would think, to the point where I would keep forgetting that the person I was talking to was an entirely different species. Alright, from here, every main story spoiler is fair game, so let's talk more concretely about some of the more emotional moments. For example, in the best friend ending, a surprisingly poignant discussion is brought up about outliving your partner, and whether length or quality of life is more important. In another ending, the bullied shy bookworm is revealed to be a spirit who couldn't move on without the help of the protagonist. This brings up questions of the afterlife, while simultaneously pulling on the heartstrings of the player. And yet this is the same game that has such absurd lines as, "Real men fight in the nude! You're misunderstanding, it's just a transvestite cafe!"
And so the world was engulfed in pudding.
But I digress. Back to the depth. Another unexpected level of depth in this game comes from just how many genres it undertakes, all while cementing hints at and staying true to a larger narrative. One moment it's a poignant love story, the next it's a James Bond-esque spy thriller, or a horror slasher film, or even a turn-based fight between good and evil. And while these more outlandish genres are taking place, the game finds a way to work in both the emotional poignancy I mentioned, and subtle hints to the final narrative. These could be as small as a character smelling bleach, or 2 characters liking the same kind of beans, or as large as the bad ending, where if you fail to court any of your alien compatriots, you're unceremoniously killed by a mysterious political party. None of these clues are too overt where it becomes obnoxious, or even that noticeable. A lot of these clues I only realized after reflecting upon the game, which, again, is really surprising for a game that screams nothing but absurdity and quirkiness. Yet another great aspect for the game is the protagonist herself. While most games try to provide a blank slate for the player, this character actually has a lot of personality. She's feisty, awkward, trusting, and, as expected, incredibly quirky. With each new ending, the player not only feels an emotional attachment to their given partner, but also to their in-game avatar. And while it would be nice to have some more overt control of some of the decisions in the game, I think that's more a fault of the game's format rather than the writing. But these subtle pushes to make the protagonist lovable in her own right is actually part of something much darker. A brilliant gut punch to the audience in the final ending where... No, seriously, if you haven't at least seen the beginning of the final ending, go check it out. Good? Okay. So that gut punch comes in when, after all the time spent with the main character, she's found dead soon after the summer ends. In this alternate story, none of what you've done in the main campaign actually happened, and the entire game switches to a giant whodunit murder mystery from the point of view of the best friend. Not only is this another great shakeup in terms of genre, mixing elements of mystery and horror, but the creator was also devilishly brilliant by hiding this ending after all the others, and not just because of the big reveals and payoffs. It cleverly relies on the replayability factor of dating sims, and uses that against the player. In order to see this ending, you have to go through all the other endings, and the creator relied on that eventual connection with the protagonist to rip away everything the player knows about the game. It's an absolutely brutal move, yet one that takes sheer guts to do and is done so well you can't help but respect it. From here, all the different characters are shown to be connected to each other in some shape or form. I won't go into too many details here, but I will say that all of the clues from the main game start showing up in the finale, leading to revelation after revelation. Secrets are revealed, terrors plague the school, characters show their true selves, and yet through all of this, the game never loses that emotional subtlety. Even in its final moments, the game is less about the journey you take and more about the people you meet along the way. If that sounds sappy, it can be, but for a game where you can literally romance a quail, it's surprisingly heartfelt and genuine throughout. And while I do have my issues with the game, like having to replay certain endings in order to get to the final ending, the game stuck with me for days, if not weeks after, which, given how rare that is in the games industry nowadays, is a hell of an accomplishment. Hats off to you, Hatoful boyfriend. I like the cut of your jib.
Yes!
So what makes this game really shine? For one, it uses classic character archetypes as a branching point for relatable storytelling. For another, it goes through many genres, giving unique and varied endings, all while never betraying its established world. And possibly most importantly, it uses both elements of story and expected player reaction to deliver a shocking, powerful, and almost beautiful final ending. It deals with themes of loss, of fear and pain, of growing up in a world that isn't quite fair. And I think that's something every birdie can relate to. There's a link to the game down in Hyrule. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next week. I didn't have a shirt for today's topic, so Teenage Mutant Ninja Squirtles, because animals.